And I want to get to one more part of the real critique here with you, which is Israel. And please bring up the photo that I took today. This is in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, of a sign that's being put out there as one of the closing messages, I guess, for the Trump campaign, or whatever Republican operative is putting this stuff up. It's indicative of the message that they're trying to hammer home here. So that's save Israel, vote Trump. Okay. Again, maybe I'm crazy, but for all the faults that I think are correctly assigned to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden in terms of how they've conducted the policy in the Middle East over the past year, Trump is permitted to go with imams in Michigan and insinuate that maybe he'll be preferable to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden because he wants to end the war without ever specifying what that would even mean. Because if you look at what his record was as president, it was more deferential than anybody to Israel. He put Jared Kushner in charge of the Israel-Palestine portfolio. I interviewed Trump's co-chairman for his transition team, Howard Lutnick, who told me directly that Jared Kushner's intensively involved in staffing a second Trump administration. So he's right back in the fray, maybe more behind the scenes this time. That's why it was good that Lutnick confirmed that to me on the record. He did everything imaginable that Israel could possibly want. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu goes around and proclaims Trump to be the most pro-Israel president of all time. That's why Trump himself proclaims that. That's why every pro-Israel, quote unquote, not every, but many pro-Israel donors, like even Paul Singer, who was a hedge fund billionaire who once opposed Trump back in 2015, 2016, why he's pouring millions of dollars into Trump's campaign operation, because they rationally view Trump as a vehicle for enacting their interest, which is a hardline, zealous, pro-Israel policy. Again, I'm not excusing the Democrats by pointing this stuff out at all. Democrats more have secular Jews, I think, in their coalition who are hardcore pro-Israel in their own way, but less messianically religious. Trump brings to the fore a certain kind of pro-Israel activist, and he goes to their events where they present him with awards like the Zionist Organization of America, the Israel Heritage Foundation, where he has people on stage with him saying that we need to put Donald Trump back in the White House because that'll enable us to rebuild the Third Temple, meaning destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem and rebuild the Third Temple. Now, is that likely to happen? Probably not, but you get a sense of the types of people who are adamant about wanting Trump to win. Itamar Ben-Gvir, like the fanatical messianic minister in the current Israeli government, he was so passionate about the need to endorse Trump that he breached ministerial protocol and publicly endorsed Trump. So I just feel like there's stuff like this that ought to be better covered. And sometimes I feel like I'm spitting into the wind. We've covered a little bit on this show, but maybe not enough, because if people, are alienated with the Middle East war, which I am as well, and that's part of why I didn't vote for either candidate. But I specifically did not vote for either candidate because Donald Trump is not unclear about his policy on Israel. To the extent that he's calling for the war to end, he's calling on Israel to accelerate its pulverization campaign so that it can declare victory quicker. And I think that should be noted.
I want this to be helpful, what I'm about to say. I feel your frustration. I empathize with your frustration. But I also believe it is a consequence of the two-party system. The reason why so many liberals who say that they care about Palestine are going to walk into the voting booth and hand Democrats a mandate to continue funding and perpetuating and enabling this genocide is because they believe that for all of her faults, for all of the blood on her hands, for all of her genocidal culpability, Kamala Harris is better than Trump. And the same is true on the other side, even though I think there are legitimately good faith, anti-war folks on the right who do not want American tax dollars to be going in unprecedented volumes to the state of Israel, whether or not they care about the humanitarian crisis on the ground, or whether it's simply a financial concern. They don't want it. And yet they will line up and they will vote for Donald Trump because they think on some other set of issues, he is better than the alternative. And there is only one way to break out of this. And with all due respect, Michael, I don't think it's not voting, because that allows both sides to continue to exploit these like marginal issues that they can feed to their base as grist to get them to the polls one last time, even though these big ticket issues that are very important to them, these core, basic, fundamental working class issues that are so important to them, these existential issues like entire towns wiped off the map due to flooding and these environmental crises that were happening, are just simply not on the table. And if you want to get people to lock in my experience during this election season, if you want people to lock in to actually not feeling despondent and like all they have to do is vote for the lesser of two evils, you have to give them a path where you have to demonstrate the utility and investing in building alternative party systems that can ultimately tear down this two-party system. There was once a time, speaking specifically of the Middle East, there was a moment in American history where there was an issue that was so polarizing, that was so innervating to the public, but that was not reflected on either of the two major parties' party tickets, that a third party emerged and is now what we consider today the Republican Party, and the issue was slavery. And I do think that there is a very strong argument that the level of political disaffection is getting so high in the United States of America that it is time for people with platforms to start making the argument for why both the corporate Democratic Party and the corporate Republican Party need to be unmoored, need to be defeated. And for me, in my experience, talking to people specifically about not just resisting the other side, but affirmatively building a party that can actually advocate for their interests, because it does not take corporate money, fundamentally is able to move differently and act differently and speak differently because it is not bought by AIPAC, which both of our corporate parties are, is the difference in getting people to be engaged and invest in the kind of very meaningful critiques that you're making on both sides of the aisle.
Just to defend myself briefly, and then we'll wrap up. I did cast a vote, right? I went into the polling booth.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
I cast a vote, but I wrote in, a fictional
like
character.
Donald Duck or something.
I mean, I didn't
know. Yeah.
Fred Flintstone. And I realized in hindsight that I was channeling a sense of foreboding about how either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump could send us hurtling back into the Stone Age, albeit one less cheerful than the Flintstones inhabited. But I did that, not necessarily to be cute. And, every 4 years I tell people how I vote, just in the interest of transparency. I'm not saying anybody should follow what I do, but, it's not for me to start a third party. Like, that's not what I'm interested in doing personally.
I don't think
what I do is, yeah. Well, just to complete the thought, what I do in my capacity as a private voter is analyze the choices on offer, and if I don't relate to them, or if I can't make an affirmative argument for them, then I don't vote for them. I find the Green Party and the Libertarian Party to kind of be, facsimiles of legitimate political parties. Some of the rhetoric.
And how will they change?
Really. I don't know. I'm not saying I have an answer.
How will they grow?
I'm very pessimistic.
I do have an answer, Michael. The way to get these parties to grow is to help them to get funding, in part, and it will help to, in some small way, enable them to compete with the major parties. Right now, parties like the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, although it's better funded than the Green Party, spend millions of dollars simply resisting ballot access challenges from the Democratic and Republican parties, who have no real interest in democracy. They want to keep their stranglehold over the American public and create more and more disaffected voters. They don't care if there's non-voters, as long as the same amount of 50-50 voters come into the polls that are increasingly affluent and increasingly privileged, and so that they can continue to ignore the interests of all those people who don't vote. Getting these parties to 5% of the vote enables them to get millions of dollars. But enables them to get millions of dollars in federal funding, so that we can start to have different kinds of options on the ballot. But if we keep not supporting alternatives, as hard as it is to actually grow these alternatives, 20, 30, 40, 100 years from now, Michael, you and I, God willing, are going to be sitting here across a Zoom screen from each other, making the same old complaints.
And this actually gets to why the RFK Jr. campaign, and again, the comment sections of these videos actually absolutely loathes whenever I say anything critical of RFK Jr. This gets to why that whole exercise was actually not just shambolic, but I would argue pernicious in the sense that he created this impression that he was going to be running this groundbreaking independent candidacy that could actually make inroads in the manner that you're suggesting, maybe in part due to his name recognition, the fake mythology that he runs around parroting and that people actually buy into around the Kennedy name. And what did he do? I mean, he solicited donations and resources on the premise that he was going to be running this earth-shattering independent campaign that could lead to then a real third-party movement. And then he turned on a dime and decided to subsume himself into the very, quote, duopoly that he falsely claimed that he was running to combat. So that's another element of this. I'm sure we could go on forever, Briahna. Yeah. What's any final words? Do you make predictions or anything? I don't. But do you have like a?
I'm not really in that game. But what I'm hopeful for is that, unlike RFK Jr., who I agree offered, I think, real promise. I think a lot of us, even if we disagreed with many aspects of his agenda, were hopeful that he would at least stick the landing on being an anti-war alternative in the middle of these multiple crises going on.
Yeah.
But he betrayed that. And I
just want to say, Briahna, I was never hopeful. I was never hopeful about RFK Jr. because I felt that the entire foundation of the campaign was fallacious. And I got totally castigated for that among some of these same online alternate media
good for
circles.
You. But for those of us who were hopeful and who were willing to give him some benefit of the doubt, even if we had substantive disagreements, because he had people like Dennis Kucinich, a stalwart progressive independent, as his campaign manager, it became very clear when he started taking mountains of corporate money, when he picked a VP on the basis of her having billions to fund his ad campaigns, that we weren't going to get what he was advertised as being. But what I am still hopeful about is how there does seem to be unprecedented interest in there being an independent left third party like the Green Party. I don't know if you've seen the polls that show that more Muslim voters support Jill Stein than do Kamala Harris, about 42% to Kamala Harris's 41%. This is huge and could be determinative in a number of states in the United States of America. And even if Kamala Harris wins, even if the Green Party doesn't get to 5%, there's a real model that's being shown about how voters can take their power back and vote in various blocks to advance their interests, whether it's a $15 minimum wage, whether it's labor rights, whether it is anti-interventionist politics. And all of the listeners should really think seriously before they commit themselves prematurely to a candidate, whether it's in their state or local elections or in federal elections 2 to 4 years from now.
All right. Briahna Joy Gray, thanks as always for the spirited discussion.
And Michael, by the way, if people want to hear more detail about these arguments, I recently started a Substack called Briefly, and I've been doing radars like I used to do over at Rising over their video essays, monologues that summarize some of the arguments that are being made here, so people can go over there and check that out in addition to my podcast, Bad Faith.
You're much better at promoting yourself than I am. I don't have the same elevator pitch for myself, and therefore people often don't know what the hell it is that I do, but mtracy.net, people can look it up if they want. Briahna, hopefully we'll all be alive to pick up the pieces from tomorrow and maybe reconvene and assess. So
I love that.
Best of luck.
Thanks for the invitation.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.